Welcome to our inaugural episode. This is Kink Candid. There are two of us here. I am recording my intro initially, just so that we can kind of get to know who your hostesses are. My name is Shay. I am in my mid 30s. I am married, mother of two. I have also been a full time, 24/7, biblically submissive, consensual property in various forms since I was 19 years old. He and I have been together for a while now and been married almost a year. I am previously trained Gorean style. We will do an episode about that at some future point. Do not worry, we will explain that. However, I do no longer practice that at this point. We are more of a think 1950s style housewife, Stepford wife, as I jokingly call it. I am also religious. I am a Christian, and that is part of the reason that I am a submissive, is because I am what we would call biblically submissive, which there'll be an entire episode about that as well. So my religion will factor into this. My co-host will explain how that works for her, but that is a factor for her as well. What we'd like to do here is sort of discuss the way that this looks for those of us who live this as a lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with the bedroom play, bedroom only style of living the lifestyle. That, however, is not what we do. And because it's different, it looks different, it acts different, the rules are different, the boundaries are different. So we're looking to kind of put that out there and discuss it from this perspective, just so people can kind of get to know what it is we do and how that looks and how it differs from other forms. Let's be clear, this is not a our way is better. It is more our way is different. We do things a little differently. And so we wanted to kind of talk about that. We're going to talk about a variety of topics. We will have some guest hosts and things of that nature. And each of our episodes will include some information about what it is we're talking about. We do also have a Discord server. If you'd like to come and chat with us, just send us a message here uh, on Anchor, and one of us will be happy to let you know how to find us on Discord just so that we can have discussions. There is a plan in the future to have live discussion nights on various topics so we can get some perspective from you, our listeners. What do you want to know? What do you want to talk about? Do you have thoughts on these topics? So we'll be setting that up as well. We do broadcast via Anchor, and so you will get some advertisements uh, as part of the podcast. And we do have a listener support option. So if you would like to help support us and get this moving along, there that is an option too. But this is more of a labor of love for the two of us. It's not about the monetization for either of us at this point. This is just about putting out a perspective that maybe doesn't get talked about nearly as much, that isn't as well known. And because I know there are younger submissives and younger dominants who maybe feel the way we do, but they don't really know how to express it yet because they're so used to seeing it in through the lens of a different style. And so we want to let people know there's not anything wrong with being who you are and what you are. And so that's what this is designed to do. And we are calling it Kink Candid because we are going to be totally candid and open about kind of who we are and what we do. I'm hoping that my co-host can join us here shortly. She does work nights, so it's not always easy to get her on the line with us. But uh, I'm hoping to have her available here shortly, and then we want to hold a discussion tonight between the two of us to put out there for you about the different roles and terms that we will use. And with these sorts of topics, none of the terms are strictly defined, but it is important that we all be on the same page and you understand how we are using those terms and what that means when we say them. And so we want to start there and then kind of branch out into other topics once we've cleared up what we mean when we say submissive, what we mean when we say baby girl, things like that.
Hi, my name is Munchkin. I am in my 40s. I am a mother of two. I have been married for 17 years. We've been together almost 20 years. I am a slave slash baby girl. I have been in the lifestyle since I was about 20 years old. I don't know what else to say.
As I said, I think it's important that before we go any further in any of the discussions that we want to have on this project, to kind of discuss what the various terms and roles can be. These terms are usually not strictly defined, but in order to have good conversations about them, it's important to know what we mean when we say that. I will defer to Miss Munchkin on a couple of these subjects just because she has more experience with it than I do. Um, Starting with the right side of the slash, as it's sometimes called, there is typically your slaves, your submissives, and your bottoms. Bottom is not going to come up a whole lot for us simply because that typically refers to play only, bedroom only, which
neither of us are.
that's not what we do. So we're not going to talk a whole lot about that. Your submissives, when I say submissive, I mean someone who is voluntarily submitting to another, but they maintain a certain level of autonomy. They have more ability to say, no, I've decided I don't want to do that without having negotiated it at the start. That makes sense, right?
They have more of a say so with how things go on a day to day basis, and how things go during their relationship.
Whereas slaves, which is what we both primarily identify as, it's more of a, we have limits. Don't get me wrong, because like I have my hard limits, but we discuss those at the beginning of the relationship. And once the collar went on, my ability to say, no, I'm not going to really isn't a thing at this point. I can't suddenly decide tomorrow.
You will hear people refer to it as a TPE or a total power exchange. And that's really what it is the ability to be able to trust him and totally relinquish that power to him. That's what a slave involves.
So outside of those hard limits, I don't have the ability to really say, no, I don't feel like it. That's just not a thing that we do. And the same's true for the other side of this, of things. The your tops. That's again typically play specific. It's bedroom specific, and then you have your dominants, who are commonly your sirs, your people of that nature, and then you have your masters, which is a whole other thing. Um, some submissives say master, but they aren't slaves. Which
master does not only encompass how they are during playtime or how they are in their relationship. Master really encompasses who they are, like all the time. Master is a 24/7 role. As we've already mentioned, our slave role. It's the same on the other side of the slash for masters. That it's a lifestyle. It's a 24/7 role for them.
I've often said that, and that being submissive is something that you do. It's a choice that you're making. It's something that you're doing. Whereas for me, being a slave, that's who I am.
That's who I am. Yes.
At all times.
It's part of my identity. It's not even something that I have to think about and choose to be that person today. I wake up and that's just who I am.
Then you get into your littles, your baby girls, and brats, which are so often mixed up. I think a lot of people think they're all the same thing, and they're so not.
They are not. They are not. I identify as a baby girl because I do have that playful side about me. There are times that I will push limits. I mean, not. I will toe limits. I guess that's the proper term. I will toe limits. I'm very playful about it. And I do enjoy some of the things that, I do enjoy a session with my coloring books. I do enjoy some cartoons. I enjoy cuddling. I enjoy, so I do have kind of that baby girl persona.
As opposed
Um,
to the littles who typically have a more of an age regression component, in my
yes,
experience.
yes, typical littles will regress to a certain age, a certain time in their childhood, and that's where they find comfort. And that's where they're comfortable, and for them, for a lot of people, their safe place. Um, so the difference there is literally the age regression. Then you get into things like diapers and pacifiers and cribs and all of those type of things go along with your little lifestyle.
And then you've got your brats. Now, it's important. I want to talk about brats a little bit because it kind of sounds sometimes, if when you listen to the two of us talk, like we have a brat component. And I don't think that either of us actually do, because brats, in and of themselves, your brat wants to disobey. She wants to break the rules, specifically because they want to be overpowered. They want to be made to submit. And that isn't a thing that I do, and I don't think it's something you do either. It's
No.
more, if we're pushing limits, it's because we're feeling unsteady, unsure.
Yes.
And the analogy that we've used a lot is the I don't need to be on a short tie out like a dog does, but I need to know there's a fence.
Yes.
And if I don't know the fence is there, I'm gonna keep running until I find it.
Yes, I will keep grappling for it, which includes the pushing of limits until someone says, "Okay, yes, you have just ran into the fence."
Surprise, there's still a fence, and that's important to know. And that's true of, I think, outside of brats. That's true of littles. That's true of your baby girls. That's true of a lot of submissives. And in my experience, a huge number of slaves will do that because we just don't feel safe without,
Every so often we need that reassurance. We need that tug, if you will. I don't necessarily need to be clipped to a short tie out, but hey, I need to know the tie out is there, or the fence is there. And I feel like, a lot of women are like that we need that reassurance every once in a while.
And I think the biggest difference for me between a submissive and a slave is the fact that many submissives, and not all, let's be clear, but many submissives can kind of turn it off. They can kind of leave it in the bedroom. They can say, I'm not submissive in this moment. I'll hear the term sometimes used to people have conversations or step out of their dynamic and have a conversation out of their dynamic. And I think it's really, really important to note that when you talk to either one of us, there is no out of dynamic.
It literally is who I am when I wake up in the morning, who I am all day long. It's who I am when I go to bed at night. It's not something that I choose. It just is.
Even if we're arguing, even if we're in the grocery store, it just is. And so I think that's something that I think in today's sort of lifestyle community that's often lost because it's not obvious. I don't walk on a leash when I go to the grocery store. I don't.
However, I do wear my collar.
That stays on.
Yes.
Fun story. It popped off while we were in an argument one day because the screw came loose.
Oops.
And it was really funny at that moment because we were just like, wait, what, really? That's a thing that happened? But it stays.
However, barring any acts of God, it stays on.
medical emergencies and apparently it unscrewing itself for no reason. Outside of those things, it doesn't come off.
Sometimes not even medical emergencies because it gets takes your chin. But yeah.
That's a story that actually happened to me once. But it stays on all the time. And it is a source of security. And I don't. Yes, I have limits. I think that's a common misconception too. The TPE slave, that doesn't mean that I don't have limits. I do have limits. I have hard limits. I don't have a lot of limits, but I do have them. And but he knows that, and he knew that when he decided to collar me. I told
Right.
him these
And
are the
I think
limits.
that's a big thing too is honesty up front going in. If everyone's honest about their true intentions and their true desires going in, then you know from the get go what everybody's game plan is. I think it's very important that there are conversations before anybody is ever collared or ready to submit to anyone or ready to call somebody daddy, that there is that sit down and that hard, honest discussion about what your wants and needs are and versus what their wants and needs are so that everyone's on the same page.
I think I've actually literally been told on more than one occasion that our relationship is inherently unhealthy. And I think that's part of the reason that I wanted to do this so much is because I do think that because if you don't live the way that we do and you're looking at it from the outside, there's a lot of preconceived notions. There's a lot of the discussion that was happening was about whether or not the dynamic changes when you're having an argument, if you're in a relationship. And, we're both married. So we're going to have arguments from time to time. He's not just my master, he's my husband. And occasionally we get annoyed. He does or I do or both. And I'm allowed to speak my piece. Let's be very clear. I'm allowed to say, hey, you know what? This is really bothering me. Let's talk about it.
As long as it's done in a respectful manner.
But it doesn't change the fact, yeah, exactly that. I have to speak it respectfully because at the end of the day, I'm still his girl, his slave, regardless of whether we're arguing or not. And that's not inherently unhealthy. I think it's a misconception because people think there's this common phrasing that you hear a lot of the submissive has all the power or all the control in the relationship. And, maybe for some that's true. When I said that to him the one day, he said to me, he goes, I don't think that's really true though, not for us. He goes, you have the final control because I mean I can always say for it if I needed to. But in all the time that we've been together, I've never actually needed to. But the trust level is that high. But I could if I needed to. But I don't have the ability to turn around and just be like, no, I don't feel like it. That's not a thing.
No, that's not a thing.
And that may not be right for everybody, but I think there's this conception that because it's different, because it's the way we do it, because I don't have the ability to turn around one day and be like, I don't feel like cleaning the house today. Yeah, that's not an option in these types of relationships.
Not a thing.
We don't have that, and that's not inherently bad. It's not inherently evil or bad or unhealthy. It's a different thing, and I started doing this for that reason in part, partially because of that, partially because I think there's not a lot of discussion about religious influence in submission, yes, which is definitely a thing for me. And because I know
we have had more than one discussion about how our religious beliefs play into our lifestyle and in fact lead towards our lifestyle.
I submit in part because of my religious beliefs, because I believe the scriptures tell me that I'm supposed to.
Yeah, and I struggled for a while, and I think there are probably more out there that have struggled as well, because I struggled for a while to feel like I could have my lifestyle and still have my religion and my morals and my and it took me a while, and it took me some research and looking into what I believe and what I think, to be able to settle that within myself, that not only could I have both, but I believe that the scripture points me to have books.
The other thing that comes into play is that I have a couple of family members. I'm not out with all of my family. Some I am, some I'm not. And I think that's pretty common, I think, for a lot of people. Some people know, some people don't. My little sister does know, but she doesn't understand exactly what it is that we do and why we do it. But when I told her we were talking about having these discussions, she said she wanted to listen in part because she feels like she freely admits that she's coming into this with some preconceived notions, some preconceived ideas that maybe aren't accurate. That
Yeah.
that she's looking at it through the what I call the 50 Shades of Grey lens.
Yes.
Um, I promise I will not have a rant about 50 Shades right now, but I have real issues with it because I don't think it's an accurate portrayal, at least not of the lifestyle the way that it is for me. Um,
Yeah.
I don't.
It was a great read. It was a great book. It was a great movie. It was a great couple, miniseries there. But it is what it is, and it literally was a fictional tale, and it's not an accurate portrayal of the actual lifestyle.
And I think right now play is very common. Um, Bedroom only, as I call it, which again, as I said, there's really nothing wrong with that. Let's be very, very clear. I am not attempting to one true way anybody. My way is not necessarily better or worse than anyone else's. I just think it's not as common. And so we get a lot of discussions about what it looks like for people who it's something they do in the bedroom, they have a good time, and then when they step out of the bedroom, they go back to being their normal, quote unquote, vanilla selves. And I don't have a vanilla self.
This is me.
This is exactly who I am. I saw a discussion online not too long ago about sort of how did a long-term DS relationship differ from a quote unquote regular relationship. And I couldn't answer the question because the first thought that went through my head was my DS relationship is my regular relationship.
Yeah.
We are both at the end of the day. And that I think it's beautiful. I really do, and I love it, and it's what I have sought to be. And I love the fact that he's both. He's my master. He's my dominant. He's also my husband. And, we do all the normal stuff that everybody does on a day to day basis. We go grocery shopping and clean the house and go to the gym and all that fun stuff. But
Yes, and my poor master has to encompass all of that, plus the fact that at times I need him to be the daddy. I need him to be, and he is amazing with it. And I don't think that we give a lot of masters. I don't think we give them the credit that they deserve. We hear all the time, well, the submissive or the slave has all the control and all the, all the power and all that. But I don't think that true masters, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes. I know that. They have a big job. And a lot of times I don't feel like they get the props that they deserve for everything that they do and everything that they encompass on a daily basis.
and if you've ever seen any of the discussions online, because I float around, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Reddit. I'm on a bunch of different social media sites, and so I see a lot of discussions out there. And I've seen a number of discussions about sort of the what are people talking about what they felt were ridiculous rules that a dominant wanted them to follow. And I'm reading through this list, and again, this is part of the inspiration behind this show, is the fact that I'm reading through this list and looking at it and going, okay, but those things aren't inherently ridiculous. They're not ridiculous on the surface. We're not talking about people saying that, an example to me of what would be a ridiculous rule would be things like you are never allowed to speak ever again. You must be completely silent at all times from here until the end of time. That would
Yeah,
be
that's never
ridiculous.
going to work.
It's unrealistic and it is ridiculous and it's not fair.
No
But
class in the chatterbox. So,
it's not really going to happen. But some of the rules that I see where it's like, wear the collar at all times or, ask permission before going to bed or go to bed at a certain time or ask permission before doing XYZ. Those things might be ridiculous in the context of someone who is a bedroom only kind of a bottom, so to speak, a bottom or a part time submissive, which is a valid thing that you can be. But those things, when you see these discussions, you see people saying that these things are ridiculous on their surface, and then it gives the impression to younger submissives, younger dominants who are coming along behind. And I feel like such an old lady saying that because I'm really not that old, I swear. But but I've been doing this a long time, and I would hate to see some young person coming into this for the first time at 19, 20, 21 years old, and seeing these discussions and seeing that they're not a bottom, they're not a top, they're not bedroom only, and feeling like they are invalid or abusive or wrong. I've seen men like my husband called abusive more times than I can count. Please allow me to assure you that my husband is absolutely not abusive in any way, shape, or form.
Oh no,
Um,
I've met him. He's an incredibly nice man.
in fact, if anything, I'm probably slightly spoiled, honestly.
No,
um,
it's not probably. She's spoiled.
I'm a little spoiled. That's fair. But
But of course, Munchkin has no room to talk. I'm over here kind of giving her grief, and as she knows, I am very spoiled. Which kind of leads into why with Shay we can do the slave role, and with myself we have the dual slave slash baby girl, because I do get that spoiled. He's my daddy. You know, he does little things to remind me on a daily basis that I am his little girl. So that kind of, I think, goes along with the territory, but it, yeah, they are in no way, shape, or form, or ever have been, abusive or even towed that way.
not even close. If anything, what I always tell people, and this is something that I wanted to kind of bring up because it's very, very important before we go any further, that for a lifestyle 24/7 TPE slave, whatever term you want to use, you will hear me say that I am property. Um, that is not as horrific as it sounds. It really isn't.
No, I am property. I am owned.
Think pet, not furniture.
Yes.
I am probably the most precious possession that he has.
And he tells me that on a regular basis.
Oh yeah, he does, and he's fantastic, and he does wonderful things for me. And I think, what does it look like on a day-to-day basis? What does being a 24/7 lifestyle slave look like? I jokingly say, and it's not, it's only partially a joke, honestly, but what does it look like? It looks like a 1950s housewife. Yes, I get to voice my opinions. Yes, I have opinions. In fact, in my day-to-day life, I am probably classified as at least marginally a feminist. More on that later as to why I don't fully embrace that label anymore, but that's neither here nor there right this minute.
However, I mean, and there are plenty of decisions and opinions, and I definitely have my own, and he is very aware of that. He hears about them on a regular basis. However, the final decision, the final say so, is referred to my husband, who is, and as far as I'm concerned, will always be the head of our household.
He is exactly the head of household. Think June Cleaver. Yes, June Cleaver might have an opinion, and she might tell her husband, "Hey, you know what? I think maybe this would be a good idea." We joke that the phrase that we use a lot at my household, it's a joke. Hugh will laugh if he hears me say it now. Is just look at him and go, "Have you considered?"
Yes. Because it is not in me, and not wise of me at all, to look at him and say, "No, dear, you're wrong." However, I will look at him and say, have you considered this possibility, or have you considered this outcome? And you're right. He does laugh now because he knows.
He knows exactly what that means now. I won't say to him, "You should do XYZ." I will, however, go, "Have you considered perhaps
Yes.
that this might be an option?" And sometimes he says, yes, I've considered that and I've decided against it for various reasons. And sometimes he goes, you know what, that's a really good idea. And, do I have any control in my house? Absolutely. Who does the meal planning in my house? I do. Who handles making
Well,
sure
she does planning. Trust me, she does planning.
I'm in charge of making sure the bills get paid? But I'm in charge of that not because I said I'm going to be in charge of that. I'm in charge of that because he said, this is a thing that I want from you. This is a way that, and that's, I think, the other difference between a submissive and a slave is that a submissive is able to say, this is a thing that I'm keeping control of. I'm taking control of this part of my life. This is something that I am in charge of, and I'm not giving you that. And that's not bad. I'm not insulting that at all. But that is a decision that they are allowed to make, to say, I am keeping control of money or meal planning or what I wear on a day-to-day basis. I control what I wear on a day-to-day basis, but not because I said I'm not giving you control over my wardrobe. I control what I wear on a day-to-day basis because he said I don't want that control.
I control what I wear on a day-to-day basis now that the wardrobe has been bought. However, there were some rules that went into purchasing that wardrobe and how and when certain things were appropriate when they weren't. Like my husband has a rule that, any of my shorts, any of my skirts, if I wear them outside of the house, literally I need to be able to stand up and put my arms down at my sides and my fingertips need to touch the hem. But there again, these are things that we had discussed ahead of time. And it's he doesn't go in every day and you're going to wear this today. There were some discussions and some rules and boundaries set down, and then from there it was completely my choice.
Once it's in my closet, I am allowed to wear it.
Yes.
And so he has that ability to say, wear this, don't wear that. These are things I'm allowed to wear, or things I'm not allowed to wear. If I'm not allowed to wear it, I'm not allowed to wear it. But if I'm allowed to own it, then I'm allowed to wear it. With a few exceptions. There are certain things that I'm allowed to wear in my house that I would not be allowed to wear out of my house. There are rules about that. But these are things, again, that I didn't say to him, I want you to take control over these things. These are things that we discussed before that collar ever went around my neck. Once it went around my neck, I voluntarily, and this is again the difference between a submissive and a slave, I gave up the right within this relationship outside of my pre-negotiated hard limits. And he knows what those are because we discussed them well in advance. These are things that I am absolutely legitimately not okay with. And he said, okay, I can deal with those. But once we had done that, once that collar went on, the ability to just be like, no. Yet no is not a word that he hears very often.
Not very often. He does hear only in the text that he will say, do you like how this shirt looks on me? Or do you want to eat at this place tonight? Or, do you feel like going on a hike today? When I am asked my opinion, then the word no comes in play. But, and he also hears it with the children. But
Children are a whole different ballgame. They're obviously that's a whole other thing. There are teenagers in my house. There's a teenager in my house and a preteen, and it's a whole thing. But if he says to me, "Do you want to do this?" I can say, "I'd rather not."
Yes.
But I say that with the knowledge that if he then turns around and says, okay, but we're doing it anyway, that's something I agreed to when I took the collar. They refer to it in in the context of a slave as being the last choice we ever really get to make. And it is. I said yes to that caller. And when I did that, that meant that I was saying to him, I trust you to make the rules. You're allowed to decide from here forward. And then I can say, no, I'd really rather not do this thing. But I do that again with the knowledge that he can then turn around and go, yeah, okay, I hear you. However, that's just the way it is. I have those kinds of rules. I have those boundaries. And from the outside, if you don't know what it looks like, it can look overly controlling. It can look, oh my gosh, she controls everything she does.
Yes, it can look very intimidating.
And yes, he kind of does, because I'm not a submissive. I use the term submissive because slave freaks people out, honestly. But if you were to be point blank, what am I? I am not a submissive. I am a slave.
I am a slave with baby girl tendencies.
And so, that's something that it's important to understand, that when we say slave, that's what we mean. Now, Munchkin here is a baby girl, but not a little, and that's key too.
Yes.
I will probably have someone guest with us a little bit at some point. We'll probably have a guest at some point in the future of the show to actually talk about what littles actually are.
Just a moment.
But neither of us identify in that way. She does not have a little age, a age regression. This is not a thing that she does, and it's not the thing that I do either. In fact, you'll almost never hear me. I don't use the term daddy. It's not a thing that I say. That's not part of the dynamic in my house.
I do, simply because I'm a baby girl. I use that term when I am feeling small, when I'm feeling insecure, when I'm struggling, because that term immediately registers with him and it lets him know that I need that cuddle. I need that extra security around me. I need that to feel that. So for us, it's almost an emotional trigger for him.
To know
it
that that's,
immediately
yeah,
lets him know where I am emotionally in that moment, and
now
allows him to respond appropriately.
I use most often with him. I will refer to him as and to him as master. That is the most common term used in my house. However, and I do that to distinguish him as a master rather than a dominant, because as we talked about, there is a difference. And just like for slaves, slave is who I am, not what I do. Master is who he is, not what he does. I do use the term sir occasionally. That is typically in my brain reserved for a dominant and other dominants. And
Yeah, you'll hear me use sir when I'm speaking to a master or a dominant that is not my own. Simply out of a sign of respect, and especially if I'm unsure of the title that they prefer, I will begin with sir until I am more common with that.
And I do use sir for him occasionally, in the sense that it is a way for me to address him and speak to that side of him while in public and around people that are not part of the lifestyle.
Yes.
When I'm talking to, say, Munchkin here, I will refer to him as master because we both know. But we have some friends that are not in the lifestyle. They sort of, we're out, but they don't really fully understand it because it's not something they're into. And so in front of them, if just the other day, just a couple days ago, we had them over to the house, so we're watching the fights on UFC, and they had come over. And if I need his attention for something, and we have people around that are not part of this lifestyle, I will, sir, and because he knows that that's me telling him, I need your attention. I need you to focus right now, because sir is something I can say in public.
And anytime that the four of us are in a discussion or in the same chat room or in the same place, or um, you will commonly hear us both refer to our masters as master, but you will hear us refer to the other's master differently, simply because I do have the beta girl side. I commonly refer to Shay's master as an uncle, or so a lot of times you will hear me say, uncle followed by his name, or, and there again, that's not me leaving off his title. That's it. At that point, he's called uncle because he is that close to myself and my master, that he has been given that, what's the word I'm looking for, Shay? He's been given
that privilege, so to speak, for lack of a better term.
And so uncle replaces his title because it is more intimate. It shows more of a loving, trustful relationship at that point.
And I will frequently refer to her master as you'll often hear me refer to him. There's a nickname that is used a lot, and that coupled with a title, commonly yes sir, no sir, things of that nature, simply because this is someone who is very close to me. You will hear the two of us refer to each other as sis or sister a lot. We've been friends a very, very long time. And so that's sort of where we are as a relationship. And so in that way, that is essentially my brother-in-law in a vanilla sense.
And because we have been friends for so long, there have been a lot of milestones, I think, even in the lifestyle, that we have kind of stumbled upon or stumbled through together. And that's part of our hope, is that new people coming in will be able to glean some useful information on, what we have been through and what we have learned, without maybe stumbling as much.
I kind of want us to be what it would have been nice to have when we started.
Yes.
Because we've been through a lot of transitions within the lifestyle. Both of us sort of began in that sort of Korean, which, as I said earlier, we will actually do an entire episode just about what that is, because there is a lot of misinformation out there as to what that means.
Yes, we were both trained Korean. Shay does not practice at this point. I do practice some in my household. I, for one, really miss a strictly Korean lifestyle. However, it is very time consuming. It is very, there's a lot of work that goes into a strictly Korean relationship and strictly Korean lifestyle. And so, from that point of view, we are not solely Korean or solely, we don't solely practice Korean in our home.
There's some elements I think that still bleed through, just because I spent so many years trained that way and living that way. There's elements that sort of bleed through, but primarily the reason we don't practice at this point is because the Korean version of slavery, the Kajira, is micromanaged to a certain degree. And I think a lot of people think that all TPE is like that, and for us, it's not.
No.
In my house, he despises having that much micromanaging to do, honestly. It bugs him.
Because I'm a baby girl, I use it to poke at him occasionally.
Yeah, he doesn't like me having to micromanage me. He basically wants to be able to, and I see a lot of discussions about this, and I think it's more common amongst submissives, is to have the um, punishment dynamic, so to speak, in the sense of there's a lot of punishment that happens, and I've been asked as a slave, they assume that that must happen a lot for us. And so there's a lot of questions sort of, well, how does that happen? How does that look for you? And I go, please understand that as a 24/7 slave at this point, it rarely happens. At this point, my life is not consumed with a lot of that, because what he wants from me and what he gets from me as a TPE slave is, these are the expectations. please meet them.
However, we will have a discussion on what is the difference between punishment and punishment, or punishment and maintenance.
Maintenance is a huge thing I think a lot of people don't know much about anymore.
Yes. And it is a big deal. It is something that I think a lot of slaves and submissives and baby girls, it's a need as much as, my air or my food is on a daily basis.
And I think what ends up happening is when you don't have that, particularly for slaves who are expected to sort of know where the boundaries are, and it would not be appropriate for me to act in that sort of brat style wherein I'm continually breaking the rules intentionally just to get him to do it. That would frustrate the living daylights out of him. It really would. That would drive him absolutely crazy.
It does, as his niece and the one that pokes at him sometimes. I can attribute to that.
Yeah. It drives him bonkers. He really doesn't like it very much at all. And so he proceeds to expect me not to do that. But what we had to, and this is where again this show sort of exists because of this, is because I spent a lot of years feeling like I had to push those boundaries, break the rules, push him into to discipline and punishment because I needed that reassurance, and that dynamic doesn't really exist or shouldn't exist for most, but not all, but most TPE slave master couples.
But that's going to be a whole nother.
There's a whole other discussion that needs to be had, and why that doesn't exist. And so I think that was the key thing that I wanted to kind of get across, is that we're not. It's a little different for us. It really is. We live a different life. It looks different for us, and consequently we do things a little differently. And that's sort of what I think we want to discuss here is, and here was just to discuss the difference between the different roles, because I need to be able to say in future episodes and future discussions, okay, for a slave this is true, and have that be clear as to what that means.
However, we also need to be clear on the point that as far as this discussion goes, as far as our lifestyle goes, even to the point of, the mother of a special needs child, you will hear me a lot of times refer to, when someone says something is wrong, I will refer back and I will make the statement, different, not wrong, because different is not always wrong. And for us, just because it's not just in the bedroom, just because, our lifestyle looks different is not always wrong. And for us, this is not wrong.
Yeah, we're not, and I don't intend to at any point knock any other style of living this. I really don't. If you are a bedroom only kind of person, that is absolutely valid and it's fine. If you are I am a submissive, but in these areas and not submissive in these other areas, that is also valid and fine. It is, however, different than what I do.
And please, if you have comments or you have questions and you are bedroom only, or as Shay said, we don't know a whole lot about the little scenario. So we would greatly, greatly appreciate your comments, your questions, your feedback.
Let us know if there's something that, especially if we're talking about forms of the lifestyle that we don't live, if we're getting it wrong for you,
please
let us know if we're saying this is true of this style and you're living that style and going, actually not quite, then we want to hear that. But I do want to make clear that it's very, very important to us that this discussion be understood in the context that it needs to be, that what we do and what we're talking about is what we do. And if what we're doing isn't what you're doing, then that is absolutely fine and valid for you. But please understand that what we're doing is not wrong or bad or unhealthy. It's just different, not wrong. It's just different. We do this way. And so I think if what we'd like to do next time on our next episode is maybe as we sort of get to wrapping this up, I think what I'd like to do next time is maybe, and I will ask, defer to you a little bit on this too, Munchkin, if we want to discuss a little bit about what it means to not live this lifestyle a little more in depth, a little bit more about what it means to live this not bedroom only,
Absolutely.
how that looks day to day.
Yes. Because
And
there are questions, and you know, newcomers struggle with that, and people on the outside looking in, a lot of times get a really negative impression from the get go because they have so many misconceptions and they don't know really what goes on a day to day basis. And as you've already said, what this looks like, from the inside looking out.
And I think,
So
what I want to discuss is the fact that when we say we live this 24/7 and when we say we live this out of the bedroom, that does not mean that I am walking around in, you know, leather lingerie with my booty hanging out and a leash 24/7. That's not the reality for us. And so we'll delve a little more into that, I think, in the future. But that's kind of where I want to head next. And so if
yep,
you are trying to look at what does 24/7 look like, because I see people ask that a lot. What does that look like? What is that? How does that work? And I think there's a lot of confusion about it. So I think that's where we want to kind of go with this in the future.
exactly.
And so what we'll be doing is most weeks on the weekends, we will be recording usually Friday or Saturday night and putting them up on Sundays. We were a little late this week just because things were happening, but that's the general plan. So look for us next week, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening in.